Stylistically, I love it already.
6 years?
Whoa.
Wow. Yeah.
2 million people died. So today we're going to be checking out a video called The American Wars Everyone Kind of Forgot About. And that's a pretty great name for a video. I love the casualness of the title. It's on a channel called the Alternate History Hub, which I'm not super familiar with, but I believe it has really cool animation, so I'm excited to check out my premiere video. Is that the word? The first video I've seen on their channel today. As far as I can remember, you may correct me if I'm wrong. I'm often wrong, and I'm not afraid to admit it. Before I get into the video, do be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Otherwise, the next time you're walking around, you're gonna just have a big blob on your face of dirt. Nobody's gonna tell you about it. They're just not that kind of people. So like, share, comment, and subscribe to avoid such an annoyance. You know that feeling you get in and nobody told you had a big blob of dirt in your face. What is that about? Be a decent, tell your friends, maybe even tell a stranger or not. Just feel up the situation. Stylistically, I love it already. This is fab. Great editing.
It's Memorial Day, which isn't simply just an excuse to have a longer weekend, it's officially the federal holiday to pay respects to those who died in all the wars the United States has fought in. You know, World War II, Vietnam, the Civil War, the Quasi-War, the Cherokee Wars, the Boxer Rebellion, When Americans think about the wars their own country has fought in, they often think of just the big ones. World War I, Korean War, Iraq War. But ever since the US was just 13 little states, it's been involved in numerous brief wars, both local and abroad, and a surprising number of them have kinda just been forgotten about.
America, you do a lot of wars. You do a lot of wars. Some for good reason, but you war a lot. Maybe we could talk about just like sitting down with people, having a pizza party. I don't know anything about politics. I don't claim to. I'm just joking. Some people take these things seriously when I say them.
So I want to talk about some of the wars we aren't taught about in history class. Is this alternate history? No. No, it is not. The real video I planned about Canada didn't seem too smart to release on Memorial Day weekend. Call it bad planning.
Last time America fought pirates.
Intervention in North Africa is a touchy subject for Americans today. It seems like for the last few decades we've done nothing but focus on North Africa and the Middle East. So when was the first time we had a conflict in the region? How about 1801? Yeah, when the US was still a young nation, and Thomas Jefferson was its president, America fought a 4-year-long war against pirates off the coast of North Africa. These were called the Barbary Wars, and yes, there were 2 of them. At the time, Muslim piracy was a major issue. The coastline of North Africa was made up of a series of pirate states on what was called the Barbary Coast. They included regions like Morocco, Ottoman-controlled Algiers, and even Tripoli. The main thing that united them was they really liked to raid incoming ships. European and now American ships that would cross into the area would often be attacked, and had a ransom not be paid, its sailors would be sold into slavery. This was actually a crisis at the time.
By the way, I'm just loving the style on this channel. I just love, it's so tongue-in-cheek. They're making education interesting, which I must applaud.
Came a debate whether or not to pay off the pirates or to fight them. Jefferson reasoned that paying off the ransoms only would encourage more piracy. When Jefferson became president, the pirate states tried to force another ransom, but Jefferson didn't comply. In response, Tripoli declared war on the US. And eventually, all the Barbary states began raiding American ships. We today debate about how the president can use the military without an official declaration of war. Well, this conversation kinda began here. Congress concluded that Jefferson had the powers as commander-in-chief to stop the pirates, protect Americans, and destroy Barbary vessels. Effectively, this was the 19th century version of intervening against terrorists without a declaration of war. Battles were few in the period.
That's interesting.
It was really just a naval blockade of North African cities with the occasional raid. There was one time the Americans took the city of Derna, raised the stars and stripes over foreign land. After 4 years of this war, Tripoli surrendered and a peace deal was made between the US and the Barbary Coast. Piracy remained an issue for decades in the region, leading to another Barbary War in 1815. Once European naval technology became far more advanced than the pirates, Muslim piracy died in the region altogether, leaving behind this strange tale of when Jefferson sent the Navy to fight against North African pirates.
That's interesting. I definitely think I remember in school a chapter called The Barbary Wars, but I didn't know the ins and outs of it. I never remember. I never absorbed that information when I was in school, you know? Does anybody else feel that way? That they learned a lot more from independently going and looking stuff up than they did in a lot of their subjects in school? That time, America invaded Florida and genocide.
When Americans learn about the relationship between Americans and the natives, well, they don't really learn about it. We talk about the Pilgrims and natives, then skip over to cowboys and Indians in the West. So really, most Americans only learn about the beginning and the end. We don't teach about the couple centuries of constant, and I do mean constant, conflict. The United States spreading across the continent wasn't just people in wagons moving and taking empty land. It often involved American soldiers fighting against a guerrilla-style native resistance. Florida once used to be Spanish land, and in that Spanish land there was a native population, mostly called the Seminole. They lived there and formed an active military resistance to the United States. After the Seminole massacred nearby American settlers, the United States wanted retribution, and so the military was called in. The problem was, Spain actually hadn't given Florida to the United States yet, but that didn't matter. Andrew Jackson, a general at the time, gathered a force of 3,000 Americans in 1400 Creek to break the Seminole resistance.
What's a creek?
Yes, this meant that the Americans had to invade Florida. The invasion mostly consisted of village burnings and leaders being hanged. The atrocities were condemned, but it's Jackson, he didn't care. There was a period of peace, Florida became a state, but the Seminole were still a problem to the US. Well, when Jackson became president, they weren't an issue anymore. The US created the Indian Removal Act, which meant all the natives east of the Mississippi had to get out of there. The Seminole understandably didn't like this, and the Americans knew it. And eventually war did come. This war lasted, 6 years?
Whoa.
Wow. Yeah, this conflict against natives lasted longer than the US was in World War II. The Americans could do little against a group which knew their land. Seminoles would routinely kill American settlers, and Americans would routinely torch Seminole villages. But still, even after years, the Americans would be stuck in that swamp. Sometimes for so long, they had to resort to eating their horses. To be honest, this war is so interesting, it requires its own video.
40,000 Americans.
In fact, most native wars in the East do. But to cut it short, eventually after years of whittling down native resistance, the US was able to drive the Seminole to a reservation in South Florida. I feel the war was just so brutal, and in such a regretful time in American history, it's mostly just been swept under the rug, at least in the states that aren't Florida.
The animation in the video of the channel itself is brilliant, but also those pictures depicting the war were absolutely fantastic. I wonder where the source of them is from. Maybe it's in the description box. I'll check it after. When we really needed a war with Mexico.
History sure is great at perspective. There was a time that Mexico truly was sending their worst, and the border was legitimately so dangerous the United States had to fight a war to keep the violence out. This was a conflict that raged from 1910 to 1919, simply known as the Border War.
Okay, I will be straight up here as a European. I don't entirely get the relationship between Mexico and mainland America. It's not something that we specifically learn about in school, and I only kind of came to understand as an adult that illegal immigrants are a thing that are like accepted largely, and that it's also part of what helps the country run, but then also people are against it. Some people are for it. I know it's a controversial subject, but just saying, I, as a foreign person, I'm super not up on this whole thing.
In 1910, Mexico pretty much collapsed and was in complete anarchic chaos. Not even today's violence could come close to how bad it was. This was called the Mexican Revolution, which is way too complicated to get into right now. Long story short, imagine a far worse Syrian civil war on America's border. It lasted 10 years and 2 million Mexicans died. The war was just complicated and confusing, and the United States hated everybody involved, so they decided—
Sorry, I just need to pause that because 2 million. When I come from a population of 5 million people in Ireland, 7 million including Northern Ireland, 2 million people died. I can't even comprehend that number.
To just secure the border and fight anybody who tried to cross in. At some points, revolutionaries would just attack American towns, and battles raged to stop the Mexican rebels from seizing it. Sometimes federal Mexicans tried to attack, and gangs and Germans— like I said, it was a confusing time. In this time period, the United States basically just waited for Mexico to get it together to stop people from attacking inside, and the Americans invaded Mexican territory at times too. This was a back and forth that continued until the Mexican Revolution ended by 1919. Was that the most interesting conflict? No, but it's a little bit of context when we imagine how bad Mexico is today and how bad border violence could be. History teaches us that it could always be far worse. So in conclusion, Jimmy, why did I make this video? I don't really know. It's Memorial Day. It's interesting to remember the less popular wars out there as well.
That was super interesting. I know like some of the names of the wars I think I'd heard before, but I didn't know the ins and outs of them. Super interesting. I always love learning new things. I was in Mexico once, very briefly. Me and my friend went there for a day after we left school for our like 6th-year holiday. And we were just in over the border. It was a bit scary because people kept trying to sell us drugs and stuff.
What kind of stuff? Everybody wants to know.
But I would like to see more of Mexico because I believe it's actually a very nice place to stay. So maybe someday I'll be lucky. Maybe no, that doesn't even work. Shout out today to a couple of very special people.
The first shout out comes from the always kind Brian Ediger. He wants to shout out all first responders, firefighters, EMTs, and the police. He wants to thank them for all the long hours of hard work that they do, and he says it's especially pertinent for him right now because his grandmother's house caught on fire recently. Don't worry guys, she's fine and her dog is fine. I always need to know about the dog, but Brian is very glad that the firefighters were there to put out the fire. That's such a great shout out, Brian. It is a really tough job to be the first person on scene. Thank you so much. Our second shout out comes from the ever thoughtful Rickey Carey. He wants to shout out all of the programmers of software and video games. He says programmers help make our lives more enjoyable to order food, products, enjoy media, take pictures, video calls, and communicate with each other all around the world in one device. I've been thinking about this a lot recently, Ricky. We rely so much on technology, and it really is those guys who help keep everything going. So if you work in that arena, thank you so much, and thank you so much to Ricky.
That's it for today. See you on the other side. Bye. Look at the little guy. He was in the vet today, so he's absolutely shattered. He had his immunotherapy injection and he had his every 2 months itchy injection. But he's getting there. Thanks everybody for checking in on him. His allergies are getting— it's hard to say really because we don't know until he's finished the course, but he's such a good boy and the vet always has special hypoallergenic treats for him. I'm so proud of him. Look how much whiter he is as well. His paws are no longer orange.